And I think we're live. All right. Well, welcome everybody. And thank you for joining us for our latest edition of our Fuse Live. I'm Ryan Smith. I'm the director of the fellowship using the science of engagement. And I'm joined today by one of our wonderful Fuse facilitators, Ms. Krisstian Langford. Say a quick hello, Krisstian.
Hello.
So we are thrilled for you to join us this week. We know the start of the school year is coming up, so we are going to share some thoughts and ideas around a strong start to those first few days. Christian's been a teacher and now been a Fuse facilitator for several years, so definitely have a lot of different ways to think about how we can lean into the idea of status and respect to our young people to think about those first few days of class. How am I framing my opening statements? How am I talking about my syllabus? How am I talking about grades, homework, all the kind of procedures, that typically take up a lot of that opening communication with especially secondary students. And how can we use that as an opportunity to show them, that we hold them in high status and respect, but at the same time, share the information that we need to share so we're ready to have a well-run class and successful year. Before we jump into some of that, though, do just a couple of housekeeping notes. So our latest Fuse cohorts of teachers have launched, but that doesn't mean we're not already looking forward to next year. We're always, ready to sign up new districts, get you on our list to be joining us for next year. It'd be the 27-28 school year. So if anything you hear about today or things you've read on our Substack or interest, and you want to bring some of our work to your district, to your campus, please reach out. I'll share something in the notes afterwards of how you can do that. We would love to talk about, how we might fit, with your programs. And also an ask for today is Krisstian and I are trying to get on the agenda for the South by Southwest EDU conference next March. And the way South by Southwest does that is it's a voting system of the public. And we would really appreciate it if you like our work, like what we're hearing today, that you would go on and vote for our session. The couple of you watching live, I'm going to put a link in the chat right now where you could go on and do that if you wish. Those of you that are watching the recording, there'll be a link on there for you to go on and vote. But we want to do a session and share a lot of the work of about 500 teachers and tens of thousands of students that we've worked with over the last several years here at UT Austin through the fellowship using the science of engagement. Our session's about it's called Disengagement Isn't About Attention, It's About Status, which very much aligns with everything that teachers work with and work through when they're in our fellowship program of thinking through what we know about young people, their development, and how we can frame our language to make sure they know that we hold them in high regard. So appreciate that. Everything we talk about today, too, will be included in the notes afterwards that you'll get a copy of if you do subscribe here on our Substack. But with that being said, joined by Krisstian today, and with Krisstian and I, before we started, we were talking about, what's our conversation going to look like? What are we going to share? And what would be timely, as schools around the country and internationally are getting back to their fall semesters coming up. And Krisstian, I would love if you just start off a little bit about yourself, some of your background, and then really to start, if you were starting a new school year with what you've learned as a Fuse facilitator, what you've seen now, what are maybe a couple things you might do differently, some tips, advice, things like that you can share with the audience?
Yes, of course. So as mentioned, I'm Krisstian Langford. I have taught 14 years in the classroom, secondary. So I did Algebra 1 through Algebra 2. And I also was able to coach track and cross country for about, I think, 5 years around there. I can't get that time right. But yes, I love being in the classroom, love my students. And a lot of times I had students that, they were the students that some people would say, they're the strugglers, and those are my babies. Those are the ones I always had in class, and those are the ones I always had to really work to connect with, and especially at the beginning of the school year. So when I'm thinking back to how early on in my career I started the school year, a lot of times it was things where it was like, I remember being told, don't smile the first week of school. Make sure you're firm with everything. And your yes is your yes, your no's are your no's. But it was just really strict and really rigid. And now with everything we learn in Fuse, it's like, no, I need to be real. I need to show myself. I need to show respect and, get these students comfortable in the environment, essentially. And that comes from like how you do your syllabus to, what are you actually doing with your kids your very first day of class? And, being a math teacher, I wasn't really the subject the kids really wanted to come to see. And so it's like that first day, I had to get that connection in order for me to actually get them to want to pay attention and learn anything that I'm trying to present them in class. So yeah, it was just something I had to really, really, really think about. And one of those,
and think about those, like those first 5 minutes, right? When even as adults, like when we walk into a new space, what, in those first 5 minutes, we're like making internal mental judgment calls, right? Of like, how do I act in this space? Like what's safe to do? What's not safe to do?
yeah,
Who's this, this teacher, this authority person is going to be talking to me. So I would just like in those first 5 minutes, like what do you think is going through most of our teenagers' minds? And how as a teacher, like how might you think of those first 5 minutes differently than maybe you did in the past?
yeah. I know in the first 5 minutes of a new class, you're trying to like size everybody up. It's like, who's in here? Where's my safe place? Who am I going to talk to? What type of teacher is this? And so, instead of like going through the syllabus first day, the first minute of class, these kids are walking in already uncomfortable. It's like some things that I would do is, I know I had a double block class. And so I had these kids for 2 hours, and these kids were kids that they didn't pass their Algebra 1 star, didn't pass Algebra 1, and they were like at the age range of like 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So they're coming into my class, and I had to figure out, okay, how do I get them comfortable? So I actually had, I don't know if y'all have heard of this, but you have a bag, and it had marshmallows, it had spaghetti. I think I had 2 note cards in there, and the task was for them to, day one, first 5 minutes, they have this bag, and I asked them, in your groups, your challenge right now is to build the highest tower. And so it's one of those team building type of activities that I chose to do. And they're looking around like, okay, well, this is an Algebra 1 class. Why am I doing this? And so by doing that, they had that chance to kind of talk with everybody, look around, get the vibes. It was a competition. But it allowed me to kind of assess things. And then by doing that afterwards, that's when I started to talk about things that I felt were crucial. Like, what worked? Like, who did you talk to? What are their leaders in this group? Did anyone else say something that maybe you didn't think of originally? And of course, I'm starting to tie that into like the problem solving of the math class and how we're essentially going to work with each other and we're going to listen to each other. But it's just a way to kind of catch them early and just give them a chance to relax because they came in there stressed. And they were just kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do. So I'm going to lay back and be the cool kid. But as soon as you give them something engaging like that, you can see Mr. Cool Kid like, oh, I want to win and I want to work with these people because they're in my group. And it changed things at the very start just to kind of let things flow throughout the year.
Yeah, and what kind of responses, would you see, from, because I know like I was doing a session with a bunch of teachers earlier this week, and we did a activity to open up, and similar to that, to kind of get people talking, know each other, take some chances, take some risks. But I noticed that like if I were going to go back and do that again, even earlier this week, I probably would have been a little more transparent in my thinking, of why I decided to open up, our session, with an activity like that. So I'm just curious, like what kind of response, because a lot of our students are used to coming in on day one, maybe doing a quick like get to know you activity, but then jumping into here's my syllabus, here's my procedures, here's how homework works. Mm-hmm. Like, what kind of responses would you expect to see from students, and how might you explain it to them by taking that other approach?
Well, at the very beginning, a lot of times I didn't really do much explaining at the very start because I just wanted to get them just hands-on and like get them going. But what I did notice after is by doing something like this, that conversation that I wouldn't get from a lot of my students, it started to just come out of them. And I can kind of tell from talking to other teachers, it's like, okay, well, this kid, he doesn't talk much, he doesn't do this. But by having an activity that, now I say it's the first 5 minutes it started, but I try to focus on that being the goal of that whole first day. And then whenever it came to, you know, the reasoning behind it, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? I use that as a portion of like my traditional, like the syllabus that I would have. That was actually a section of kind of like the guidelines and things that I wanted to talk about, but I break it out throughout the whole entire week. So it wasn't just me sitting there the whole first day talking about the rules, the policies, and the procedures, but it was an activity just to get them to see, okay, this teacher, she's a little bit different. She wants to get to know us, because the questions that I would ask throughout the activity and just explaining to the students, like, this model that we're doing right now, this right here, and the mistakes that you're making and the trials that are happening and the conversations you're having right now when you're making this build, you know, I want them to relate it to that hard math problem that they're actually working on. And let it be clear that in this class, you're not alone. You're working with each other consistently. And I'm letting them know that because we're starting the class off like this is what I want to see. These are the conversations I want you to have for y'all to get to the greater goal. So I have it all aligned. And so with this one project and that one goal, essentially, that's how I want the whole year to go. The success was building the tower. The success at the end of the year is mastering everything that I've taught you.
And you're showing them what you're gonna honor, what your class is what you're gonna praise. You're gonna praise that collaboration, that cooperation, the mistakes that were made, you know, in building the tower, not just who got the highest tower.
Yes.
You know, and it reminds me of what, so 2 weeks ago, Charles House, another facilitator, and I had a discussion about our culture of learning speeches, which is, I'll put a link to that in the notes as well. If anybody hasn't seen that yet, you can go back and watch that. It's filled us some other great ideas about starting a school year with a good communication plan. And one of the things we talked about that both he and I know we didn't do enough of when we were in the classroom was the idea of telling and showing the what and why of what we're doing. You know, we might do a project or do an activity that our intentions were to, you know, show that mistakes were valued, show that, you know, it wasn't about the outcome, show that we honored certain things. We were going to praise students that took chances, and that's how we were going to show respect. But we left it up to chance that the students would be able to interpret it that way. Instead of being really transparent, is like, the reason I did this activity and the reason that I'm doing this is because in my classroom, the way that I'm going to show respect and show that I hold you in high status is that in this particular scenario or this project, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm putting this together. So just that whole idea really stuck with me of, you know, because sometimes we hear like, you know, show, don't tell. But with adolescents, you know, what I think we hear from a lot of our Fuse fellows and the students in their classes is that because teenagers aren't used to being like given justifications, you know, of adults' actions. And when a teacher does that, it like takes them back for a moment, like, wow, they respect me enough to tell me why they're doing what they're doing or what they're working on. And that can have such, you know, great impact, you know, down the road when things do get tougher and you get into the rigorous curriculum and all those things. So
yeah, I relate it to, and you've said this a couple times, how a lot of things in Fuse relates to parenting and just stepping back. And if I told my daughter to do something and I get the why, and I just know growing up that was not acceptable, but it's like she's asking and then I explain and she's like, okay, that makes sense. And so in my classroom, I kind of have to morph that into things. And so, like I said before, it was day one in all classes, overwhelmed with so much information about policies on the syllabus. And so I remember just going through, exhausted, all class periods, reading the same thing off, and just noticing that it was like, you will, very demanding speech, here are the consequences. And it's just, it was no fluff, no nothing, no explanation on how things are going to work. It's just like, tutorials are these days. Retesting takes place here. No phones. You must be present to learn. It was just, I mean, looking back and now understanding everything that we do, especially with the cultural learning speech, it's like No, this is not a process of how to get our students comfortable and understanding how to be successful in our classroom. And so later on, and with developing things with our fellows, it's the best path is to think about those little taglines. And each day, if you're going to have that, you need to really think about, what do you want your students to truly interpret from what you're saying? And going through the process of explaining and showing exactly how all this is going to work. So, for example, I would have on my syllabus, late work is a 0, or I accept no late work. And just think about how harsh that is. As adults, you understand things happen. We want our students to be involved in so many different extracurricular activities. They're staying there late. It's like, okay, are we going to have some exceptions? And then what are you going to do for that student that didn't do the assignment for whatever reason, but really wants to do the assignment? Are we not going to accept this good work that this student actually did? So we need.
What did put you on the spot? Like, if you had that in your syllabus, like what did you do? Like, so you had like no late work right in your syllabus, right, or something like that, some kind of black and white, like no zero tolerance kind of thing. But then the school year starts, and somebody does have some late work they want to turn in. Like, would you stick with what was on your syllabus, or would you work with that person?
I
What would happen?
I stuck with it in the beginning, but then I could sense something, and that was telling me what I really the teacher I wanted to be and the learning I wanted to see. That little feeling I had, I started to budge, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll accept this. But then that gray area comes in with adolescents, and you have some that will stick to the policy and some won't. And I realized the next year if I'm going to accept late work, I need to explain how it's going to go and like how they can turn it in, So is it that first time doing it? No, I wasn't consistent because I truly didn't believe in that. And I was doing it because another teacher said, we need these strict deadlines. They're never going to learn. But let's be real. Come on, there's things that happen. So the policy that I ended up changing to, and I actually wrote all this out, explained it to my students. Like the first week of school, my warm-ups were specifically the policies and procedures and the way I run my class. So they can ask questions and we can walk through it. So with the late work policy, I actually had a system where they would actually stamp the date that they would turn it in. And on every single assignment on the very top, there was a window of opportunity for turning in late work. So yeah, it took some advanced thinking, but it also alleviated them coming to me and saying, can I turn this in late? So it said the day it was due, the day it was assigned, and when they can turn it in their late work window. I had a system. They would just go and turn it in, and it was done. So it was still a deadline, but it was like there's a deadline for 100%. And then they were able to see, okay, but I can still turn it in late from here to here. Responsibility, it's back on the students. And they appreciated that, understanding that, okay, I'm not going to be stressed because, we had a late game. We traveled back late. I know the work's not going to be the best if they were to turn that in. So I gave them the opportunity to say, like, sometimes it is going to be late, slight little consequence, but I didn't actually say 0 late work. Made a difference in what I got from my students. And if they were going to do the work, I'm going to accept it. That's the whole point of them. Like, they're going out of their way to do it the next day.
Sure. And my hunch is that like most teachers end up doing that, because you became a teacher because you want to help students grow and learn and meet their goals and accomplish things. So and yet at the same time, so once
at the beginning of the year,
that's what I was going to say. Like, then why are we missing this incredible opportunity of like the first few days of a class, to like communicate these, like kind of harsh practices a lot of times, and I wonder like if maybe this is just something for everybody to think about. Like, think about your syllabus. It's important to have like your expectations, and your whether you want to call them rules or procedures written down somewhere. But in the delivery, of that, like, are you doing that delivery so you can 2 weeks later say, well, it was in the syllabus? Or are you putting it on paper so it's some kind of, cover, for yourself later Or are you doing it because you really think that's how a 13, 14, 15-year-old is going to internalize, that this is a classroom where, it's a safe place to make a mistake and all the things that you would want, your teenager to do. And then maybe try to take a shift of thinking through the first few days, and rather than try to get to the other end of those first few days with having given all the information you need to give, like covering everything that you need to cover, to how can I get through those first 3 days and have the majority of my students perceive that that I respect them, and that I hold them in high status, and that they know that I'm somebody as the adult who's going to be leading them through this difficult journey, whether it's math or science or English, whatever it might be, that I'm going to be somebody that respects them. And then you'll learn all the different procedures and all the kinds of things, that have to be learned along the way. But it's so much harder to chip away at maybe some of those first few days when you do come off as kind of black or white than it is to flip that idea.
And I believe in deadlines, so don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying turn it in whenever. So you just got to step back and think about, what do you value? If I believe in deadlines and I need a deadline, that's why I had a late work deadline. So it wasn't open-ended, but you just got to think about how flexible you can be in your classroom and have conversations. And if you realize everyone turns things in at least 2 days late because this is football season, then maybe you hand an assignment out and all your homework is you have 2 days to do that assignment. But you just got to set something up and be crystal clear with it and make sure that you follow through with it too, because the first time you don't, then they're going to be like, well, she doesn't even mean that. So.
Oh yeah. We've often, Dr. Yeager always talks about our teenagers being the world's best hypocrisy detectors.
Oh yeah.
As soon as they see any of that, if I know my teenagers, see that in me sometimes. I forgot what I was going to say. I've been thinking through when I was hypocritical probably recently, but it's things we all do. It's things as teachers, fuse teachers, any kind of teachers. When we're working with teenagers, like it's there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be things we do well, things we don't do well. There's going to be statements we make that we wish we could take back. It's just a couple of kind of some concrete things maybe we could talk, just kind of wrap up kind of with is one is wise feedback that we talk a lot about, in Fuse as well, that like when we are, even in the very beginning, like when we're explaining like why we have deadlines, of thinking through how we frame that to our students by tagging two things: the high expectation, that we have, and the high level of rigor we're going to have in our class. And that's a sign of respect. Like, I respect you too much to lower my expectations. But pairing that in our communication with the only reason I have those high standards, those high expectations, is because I believe you can meet them. If you've seen any of our other videos where we talk about that particular study that was done around that English paper of trying to get more students to turn in a revised essay, it was those two key pieces of the feedback and the communication, that I'm not lowering my standards, but I'm keeping my standards and expectations high. The reason that there's some kind of a deadline is because I know that you can meet some kind of expectation that I set forth. You're capable of doing that. But other times, like we talk about these four mindsets, right? So the mentor mindset, where we keep our high standards and our high support, but then we see sometimes somebody might take away those standards, right? And do more of a protector mindset. So I'm curious, Krisstian, if you have any thoughts on like maybe those first few days of either keeping the communication in a zone where students can see that there's high standards and high support, and then also not, taking the bait of lowering your expectations right off the bat.
Yeah, and that first day with coming in with this activity, like you have to play it well, or they can think, oh, we're just going to play games and it's going to be like, I say fun class. It's not a bad thing to have a fun math class, but it can be like a negative thought to some. So that first week, during that first activity, when I'm going through like the whys about the point of the actual activity, that's going to be the place where I'm also going to be able to say, okay, when I ask a question, this person has the floor. And if somebody else is talking, those are going to be the examples where I'm going to actually like level set everything in the classroom, and for them to understand like, oh, we can do fun things in here, but we also have to have the respect for the teacher and also for each other in the classroom. And so it's just being crystal clear and letting them understand like, she means business, but if we are going to have the opportunity to do things that are out of the norm for a math classroom, I also need to make sure that I'm respectful for everyone in my classroom and I listen to what everybody has to say. But we have to have a place that first week. I guess the strictness of it would be me explaining and showing, how do we talk to our peers? How do you work in a group? But also being able to call out things like, okay, this is what I don't want to see. This is what I do want to see. And it's kind of like that role play in that first week of school, just for them to have that understanding. And even if it's something from, if you're late for class over here, this is where, not late for class, if you're absent, over here's the bin where you pick up your work. It's one thing to say that, but we got to think about like, let's actually have the students go and walk through and show them that process so they can see, oh, she cares enough to make sure that we really understand where to pick up our papers, where to turn in our late work, what do we do when we're absent. But to me, it means something when I see somebody take the time out to actually walk through the steps and thoroughly explain, and then ask me, what is still confusing to you? Or are there any ways that I can tweak this to make this more comfortable for y'all in your learning? And not being afraid to ask your students questions and have them be a part of, what else can I add to my norms? What else can I add to my syllabus that you felt, another teacher didn't do this, but this would really help me. It's just putting all those things together that first week so they are truly a part of the classroom, and it's not just you barking out orders and telling them you must do this and not this.
Yeah, no, that's great. You make me think of like when you get a new job, like your onboarding process. Like if anybody's
Yeah.
gotten a job on a new campus, or like you get walked through, if it's a good experience,
Mm-hmm.
like you get taken care of kind of that first few days, and there's a thought out process, of how you welcome new employees onto a team, and just think like maybe you get a gift basket, maybe you get some kind of like something that shows that you're part of this new group, and the goal of that, right, is to, as the manager or whoever, is that you want your new employees to believe that you respect them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just keep coming back to maybe just thinking through that it could be a mindset shift, it might not be, but thinking through the first 3 days, and rather than thinking through like, how am I going to get all this information out, all the different procedures, all the different rules, all the different things, and really try to put yourself in the mind of a new student coming into that classroom, making judgment calls from the moment they come in over like, who else is here? What's the culture like here? Is this a safe place to raise my hand? Can I make a mistake here and not feel belittled? Can I take a chance and not feel embarrassed? So those are all the things going on in their mind. They're not thinking in that moment about like the homework procedures, or where to get the absent slate work, or things like that. So rethinking through like, can I get to the end of that first week and have the majority of my students believe that I as their teacher hold them in a high regard? Because then they're gonna put in the effort. That's gonna lead to more effort. That's gonna lead to more engagement. They might have to ask you a few times like where to find the absent late work, but wouldn't you rather just answer that like technical question, and fill in those gaps than try to improve engagement, which is a lot harder, once the school year gets going, and think through. But so much of that happens in that first impression, those first few days. And it's such a great opportunity that oftentimes if we don't have a good onboarding process or a good, or take that mindset into those first few days, we lose that opportunity. So any last thoughts, Krisstian, before we don't want to go past 30 minutes. We don't want these to be too long, but any last minute thoughts, last words of advice for all the teachers watching on starting their school year?
Just put yourself in the student's shoes and imagine how you were that first week of school, and just think about how much better it would be if your teacher actually just explained things to you and didn't start day one with the content. Just step back a little bit and understand it's easier. Get your students engaged early on, and then the learning would be a lot smoother process.
Perfect. Thank you. My last piece I just thought of, because we hear this from a lot of the FUSE students and their teachers, is that we always recommend to the teachers in our program to tell your students you're in this fellowship and here are two things that you're working on improving in your own self, this year. Because, a lot of times our youngsters aren't used to us also being vulnerable enough to tell them what we identify as something we want to get better at. And we want them to give us feedback along the way. So maybe think of one or two things. Everybody's got something that you're trying to get better at. One or two things that you're trying to improve in yourself and your teaching and your pedagogy and your processes, whatever it is this school year, and share that with your students, in those first couple days, and then ask them to see if they notice that or give you some feedback, things like that. Great way for them to feel respected, is to be asked right up front for some feedback there. Okay, so thank you, everybody, for watching. Please share this with your teams, other teachers that other professors, anybody that wants to, you think would benefit. If you got ideas on other conversations with our FUSE facilitators, you can put those in the chat as well, or the comments on this post. One last pitch to vote for our South by Southwest session. Krisstian and I want to be there to share this great work. But other than that, everybody have a great start to your school year. If you've already started, hope it's going well. If you're starting in the next couple of weeks, we will be sending good thoughts. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.